Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is Friday night and it is 7 o'clock, and it is time for a little YouTube and chill. And we like to talk about sex and intimacy, and we are surely going to jump all over that tonight. Friday night YouTube and chill, where we like to discuss the most intimate aspects of relationships. And many people may have their perspectives. I can give my perspective, but it's always great to share the perspectives of others and hear a word from experts, people who have specialized in the subject to which we are referring, and always revolves around sex. But sometimes we indirectly talk about sex. We've talked about abortion, which usually you have to have sex if there's going to be an abortion. But today we're going to just dive straight directly into it. We're going to get into sex, and we are going to talk about the importance of it. Are people prioritizing sex the way it needs to be prioritized? So we're going to, as I love to do, we're going to ask a question. Is sex the most important part of a relationship? Is it at the top of your list for your most important things in your relationship? Where do you place it? People talk about communication. So we've covered this before, did we? Well, we're going to look at it a little bit differently. You taking notes, PJ? Wow. So I did this one. So we're going to take a slightly different perspective on this one. But I'm glad you're taking notes, and I'm glad you can tell me that we've addressed it. And how do men get that message across to a woman? And how does is a woman even okay? I'm going to pull out a video, and it's going to be interesting to hear this woman's perspective on where she sees sex. So glad to hear you taking notes. How are you, PJ? Good to see you in the house. Sometimes you can take the same topic and just have a different perspective on the very, very same topic. You can't always exhaust one topic in one sitting. Just like you can have sex every day for 7 days in a row and it never be the same. That is possible. But is it the most important? Good to hear, PJ. Good to see you in the house. I'm doing pretty well. It's been an active week with clients, and when you see your clients making progress, it's always good to see your work is supporting moving things in the right direction. So learning something new. Yeah, it's good to learn something new, and I guess you don't have to learn something new every day, but it's actually good. But you know what? You know what is a great exercise is to think that which you've never thought before. That could cause you to learn something new. Uh, and thinking that which you've never thought could be completely the result of imagining something you never imagined. Usually it's going to sound crazy even to yourself. So uh, exercising your imagination to think that which you've never thought. I've had this job technically since 2003, working with consulting clients, usually executives, usually the CEO. So I provided a slightly different dimension. I actually reached into my network and pulled an executive into my, gave my client access to an executive. So I had to call on a favor from someone, and the guy is working out really, really well. No, nothing to do with COVID. No, no. I mean, this client actually, I think, had to shut down for 2 weeks because of COVID. But they make food, so they are in full force still. I meant, you meant what? So I'd like to look at a couple of things here. I'll do a screen share. So smash that like button as you come in. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, this is a great time to do that, and hit the bell to make sure you get notifications, and share this. Everyone likes to talk about sex, right? Who doesn't like sex? I'm sure there are some people who don't. Uh, Someone once said, if you don't like sex, you're probably not doing it right. COVID job, vaccine. Uh, I understand all the words vaccine, but not sure what the context is of COVID. You know, hey, PJ, I'm going to share a video and you're going to hear a woman talk about her perspective on sex. There are, so my number one priority with men is that men have zero hesitation about being masculine. Uh, no fear, no resistance, no uncertainty, no shame about being masculine. That is because you have every right, you have a divine right to be masculine. You were born man. The other thing is that women love sex way more than men realize. So it's interesting. Think about our society. We've convinced a lot of men to be ashamed of being masculine, and we've convinced an enormous amount of women to be ashamed of having a sex drive. And then we try to come together and uh, just, I never thought about it this way, PJ, so thank you. Uh, so men are shamed, have been shamed to be masculine. They've been told it's toxic and it's bad and it's threatening and dangerous and all this, even though it's masculinity that's built every civilization. And so now that's the man having no choice. He's going to be masculine no matter what, except he's hiding it because he's been told to be ashamed of it because it's bad. And yet here's the woman demanding and desiring masculinity from the man who's actually withholding it because he thinks it's a bad thing. And then the woman, on the other hand, has been told to be ashamed of her sexuality and the fact that she loves sex. And the man wants her to love sex, but she's withholding it or ashamed of it. So it's like two people being ashamed of something very different, even though the two people want what the other person is afraid to release. And then we try to have relationships and raise families in that. I mean, just look at the conflict that's in that. It's just enormous. Right. They pretend they don't. And that's the dynamic we've set up between men and women. Don't be masculine. It's horrible. That's to men. Don't be uh, don't be sexually desirous. Don't desire sex to women. And then you come together pretending to be something you're not. I mean, and we wonder why relationships don't work. It's almost like having people walk on eggshells. So I'm asking the question, is sex the most important part of a relationship? And you guys have heard me talk about, I've asked an enormous amount of women over a long period of time. I ask women, what would you do if your man said he no longer wanted to have sex? He loves you, he still wants to cuddle. All women say, I want a divorce. They didn't say they would cheat. Only one woman said she would stay, and she said she would stay because of what you said, PJ. She didn't like sex anyway, and she expected that her relationship would evolve into sort of a brother sister as opposed to husband and wife. That's what she expected a marriage to do. So think about that. Women would divorce a man if he doesn't want to have sex, and there are lots of men in sexless marriages. So, and if you look at the top reasons for divorce, sex is right there in the top 5 reasons. So sex is really important. We have this society that attempts to downplay it and say, well, communication is the most important. So I'll just read you some of my thoughts I had for this show. The topic being, is sex the most important part of a relationship? Is sex at the top? A subtitle is sex at the top of your list in your relationship in terms of what you prioritize. And so my thoughts were, when you look at divorce, sex ranks in the top 5 reasons for divorce. And many say communication is the most important part of a relationship, except sex is the most intimate communication you can have with your significant other. If it is the most intimate communication, why isn't it the most important part of a relationship? Why is that? Why do we pretend like it's just this lustful thing that a man wants from a woman, and that a man is actually using a woman to get pleasure, when women want it as much as men, except and if the man doesn't provide it, she will divorce him. That's how important it is to a woman. Hey PJ, we talk about women being liberated. See, if you hear about this, women's inability to bond. So women being promiscuous end up, I did that show, mental disorders, um, it, emotional trauma. So a lot of women are not getting the most. They're not bonding and getting the most out of sex that they would want to get out of it. So is that really liberated? Like, if sex becomes a path to mental illness and emotional trauma, how is that liberated? So a woman could be a virgin the day she gets married and be more sexually liberated than a woman who's had sex with 100 men. So being liberated, women mistake sexual liberation for sleeping with a bunch of different men and thinking that's being free. And she could actually be the most prudish woman in the world and believe that the number count makes her liberated when she's prudish. So she would be a prudish, um, she'd be that prudish tool you use in the garden. She'd be a prudish whore. Like a prostitute can sleep with, a prostitute can have sex with you here. And I think Taiwan, about, I don't know how it's done, but a woman can have sex with 100 men in a day. That doesn't make her sexually liberated. And there's the problem, PJ, when it becomes a bargaining chip, right? So if you're sexually liberated and using sex as a bargaining chip, I that's that's an oxymoron. How are you going to be liberated and using something to manipulate someone with? Like, you're liberated and you are, I mean, just think about that. You're claiming liberation as you are penalizing someone for something you both want. I mean, that's just not liberation, right? That's a prison, and the bars to the prison are thoughts. Yeah, and so there's the problem, right? So if a woman confuses sexual liberation with sleeping with a bunch of guys as opposed to having the freedom to be with one person, like I said, a woman could be a virgin the day she gets married and be liberated because she has the freedom. People talk about trust. She has that trust with this guy, and she's liberated to just express herself and be herself. But if she's just doing acrobatics to show that I can do it, it's almost like just being a machine, perfunctory. You can go through the motions and the functions and say, I'm so excited. So instead of getting the oxytocin release because she's bonding with the man, she's getting a dopamine release because she's trying to find some excitement in doing a bunch of different things. And is that liberated? Because a woman's natural way is to bond and release oxytocin. Except if she sleeps with too many different men, she traumatizes the brain and she will have a problem releasing oxytocin. So her liberation dies with her false sense of liberation. I see you in the house, Zurus. Thanks for joining. So I know it kind of convoluted, right? So I'm going to do a screen share. And so, guys, always appreciate your support. I dropped my Cash App and my uh, my Cash App and my PayPal links. Always appreciate the support. So I want to do a screen share for an article that I looked at about sex and the benefits of having more sex. Um, so PJ, promiscuous women actually, according to NIH, National Institute of Health here, uh, when a woman has sex with too many guys, so if a woman has sex with six men, she's 3 times less likely to be in an emotionally stable relationship. So there's where your problem starts. And there are two gynecologists, a man and woman, wrote a book called Hook, and they talked about how if a woman does this bond break, she has sex with one man, and to have sex with the man, she's going to secrete oxytocin so she can bond. It's the body's way of that's just nature's way of getting people to perpetuate the species, right? So she doesn't escape that, even if it's a one night stand. So she has sex with a guy for one night or 6 months or 3 months or a year, and then she breaks it, and then she bonds with another man and breaks it and bonds with another man and breaks it. Eventually that starts to create what they call emotional trauma, and that's going to affect her ability to bond with men in the future. So it becomes she's less liberated, and she's traumatizing herself around sex. So women who have been raped have sexual trauma around sex. Now, a woman who's never been raped and she's creating her own trauma around sex and her ability to secrete oxytocin and bond, she starts to impede that. And she's actually disrupting the natural flow or function of the brain. What's going on, Tony G? Good to see you in the house. You know, we're talking about sex today. And we were talking about women being liberated, and promiscuity actually has the opposite effect. If a woman is too promiscuous, then she becomes emotionally traumatized, and she's not secreting as much oxytocin in her ability to bond. So one of the liberating things for a woman is to be able to just be vulnerable and allow things to happen. That's very powerful for a woman, to just completely trust a man. That's a major part of a woman's liberation, revolves around this word trust. And if a woman just keeps going through bond break and she's not trusting any of the guys she's having sex with, she is not liberated. She's having sex to have this dopamine rush, which is very different than an oxytocin rush. And oxytocin creates more of a bond and an intimacy, in the trust. So she's not having sex for that. She's just having sex. It's almost like doing it like a machine. And there are a lot of women who have been raped and will have lots of sex with different men and not like sex because they feel like it's dirty. So they feel less valued. And then some women get raped and don't want to have sex at all because they feel like they're dirty, and it's a negative feeling. So a little bit complicated. So I took an article called "The Benefits of Having Sex More Often." It is a very well mined link on the internet. And look at this: emotional, physical, and relationship benefits of frequent sex. Carly Snyder is a medical doctor. This article was written in 2019, so it's recent. And she says, in a supportive relationship, there are many benefits to having more sex. Higher rates of sexual activity are linked to positive changes such as lower blood pressure, reduced stress, greater intimacy, and even a lower divorce rate. Check that out. While there are no one-size-fits-all rules when it comes to an ideal sex frequency, here's some insight from the latest research. Benefits of sex. See, we can blow this up. Emotional happiness, stress relief, self-image, intimacy, physical pain reduction, she's saying, heart health, improved fitness, immune function. So sex has many benefits. Ideal frequency for having sex. In a 2015 study found that general well-being is associated with sexual frequency, but only to an extent. Relationship satisfaction improved progressively from having no sex up to having sex once a week, but did not improve further and actually decreased somewhat beyond this point. One sexual encounter per week is fairly consistent with the current average. Interesting. However, our increasingly busy lives may be getting in the way of having more sex. Compared to the frequency of sex in the 1990s, adults in 2010 were having sex 9 times less per year. So they're having sex 9 times less a year in 2010 than they were in the 1990s. Interesting. Average sexual frequency, average adult, 54 times a year, about once a week. Wow. Adults in their 20s, around 80 times a year. Adults in their 60s, about 20 times a year. Man, interesting. Hey, Tony G, I would wonder if women desire sex more than men, or just as much, except they've been told it's bad to be that kind of woman. So that puts women in conflict. Even if she wants it, she has to go with this mindset of not wanting it. Good girl. And so then women believe being liberated is to just have sex with a bunch of different men, and they don't understand the consequences of that. The article continues. Although frequency often decreases with age, sexual activity in older adults remains important. In general, older married couples tend to have sex more often than unmarried peers within the same age group. Interesting. Psychological benefits of sex. There are many emotional and psychological benefits of making love. Sex is strongly linked to a better quality of life. Some of these benefits include better self-image. Sex can boost self-esteem and reduce feelings of insecurity, leading to more positive perceptions of ourselves. So I would wonder, you talk about if a woman is being promiscuous, she's sleeping with a lot of different guys. One of the things, and I've shared with you guys how a woman's brain works, she worries about things when there's no problem. But one of the things women really do worry about in sex is, are they doing it right? Women really do. It's part of the reason, it's a major reason, maybe the number one reason women have a difficult time reaching a climax is because they have insecurities around their sex life, whether they're doing it right or they're thinking about things that have nothing to do with it. They're thinking about the children, they're thinking about work, they're thinking about what the man should be doing. Is he doing it right? Women have this long list of things that diverts from the ability to enjoy sex. Now imagine a woman just continues to go from man to man to man and never develop that trust and never know if she's actually doing it right for that guy. That can create a level of anxiety for the woman. And they actually did find that women go through anxiety and depression when they are promiscuous. I'm extrapolating. Hey, Tony G, I'm willing to bet. So I had a guy come on here once, and he said they showed men and women naked images of the opposite sex, and some men were aroused by some of the naked women, except every single woman was aroused by the sight of a man's penis every time, like 100% across the board. They were aroused, and men were not 100% aroused by seeing a woman nude. So women suppress. So women are, the notion of sex arouses women and they suppress it. And as PJ was saying, they'll use it as a bargaining chip. Sometimes it's the only chip they have. And what hurts women is that we tell them that's all men want. So if a woman uses it to control the relationship or believes she has control, it's a bad move. It happens probably too often. More psychological benefits in the article. Higher rates of happiness. According to a 2015 study conducted in China, more consensual sex and better quality sex increases happiness. Another reason is more bonding. Brain chemicals are increased during sex, including endorphins, which decrease irritability and feelings of depression. Another hormone is oxytocin, the hug drug, increased with nipple stimulation on women. And other sexual activity. Oxytocin helps foster a sense of calmness and contentment. So imagine if women disrupt that flow of oxytocin because they traumatize its function by going from man to man to man. And the oxytocin gives them calmness, but they're not secreting it sufficiently enough. So they're not bonding and they're not getting the calmness and the contentment. And how are you going to be liberated if you don't have that? So it's like, just imagine engaging in activity that literally works against your biological makeup. Mandrew, what's going on? Good to see you in the house. Talking about sex. Relief from stress is another psychological benefit. Chronic stress may contribute to lower sex frequency. However, sex can be an effective stress management technique. Sex reduces stress response hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, uh, epinephrine, which affects lasting with effects lasting well into the next day. Improved sleep quality. Orgasms trigger the release of the hormone prolactin, which aids in sleep. Physical benefits of increased sex. It's fairly intuitive to understand how sex improves emotional health, but there are a number of physical benefits from sex as well. Some of these include. So now think about it. You're getting all these benefits from sex. How important can sex be in a relationship? And I just went through psychological. Now I'm going to go through the physical. But let me see. That's a good question, PJ. Right. So women really don't like to be responsible for many things. So if a woman says, I want sex as much as you do, it means she has to be responsible for having her sexual needs met. But if women play the role as you're the man, you want sex more, and you should initiate, then she could kind of sit back and not have to be responsible. And if her sexual needs are not being met, she may go cheat, but she'll just say, well, he didn't pursue sex. He didn't want sex. And here men are thinking women don't want sex as much. You're gonna have your manhood showing, huh? So, and then there will be more women turned on than you realize. Um, I've been in the gym and in other countries. I remember just walking from one side of the gym to another, and this was in Mexico, and this man was speaking to a woman, and her eyes did like when you're in the plane and you lock on for the missile to fire. This woman looked right between my legs and didn't take her eyes off, and the man was talking to her, and she just locked in looking at my penis. And at some point the guy had to turn around to see what she was looking at. So women are looking. Like, she did it almost like either she didn't realize it or she just had no shame and didn't care. I don't even know if she heard what the guy was saying. So yes, women are looking. So here's the physical benefits. Oh, and PJ, when you said having your manhood out, I worked with a guy, and he told me he had a friend living in New York. And his friend went to the courthouse stairs, and whichever woman walked near him, he would say, would you go home with me and have sex? Would you like to go home with me and have sex? Would you like to go home with me? He just randomly just asked anyone. Some women smacked him. Some women were like, you're a creep, get lost. Some women said, I would, but I have an important meeting at work and I can't miss the meeting. And sometimes it worked. Imagine, it was a numbers game. Just randomly asking women, would you go home? Would you like to go home with me and have sex? And it worked. It's not that it worked a lot, and some women looked him up and down and said, I have a meeting to go to. So they didn't say no. Yes, PJ, that's something that I really want men to understand. If men go into relationships believing that a woman just doesn't want sex as much as you do, you could take for granted and believe that she doesn't. Or you may be out cheating thinking that your woman doesn't really want sex, and then she's out cheating because you're not pursuing it. So men need to have conversations with the woman where she understands that it's okay for her to initiate sex, that she can be responsible for her sex drive. You know, one of the best ways, whether you see yourself with a woman long term or not, one of the best things a man can do is just completely suspend and eliminate judgment. Just let a woman completely be herself, because that's the fastest way for you to understand if you want to pull the plug on this or move forward. Just let her be herself. Don't judge. If she has a huge sex drive, let it just come out. Now, if you're not sexually compatible with that, you need to let her know, or you need to go to the gym, run. You need to do something if you really like her. But if you can completely 100% suspend judgment of a woman and just let her be herself, you will find that more women have large sex drives than you believe. Let them just talk about things. Let them let it out. Ask crazy, intimate questions. Whether it's sexual or not. Get them into a habit of opening up and letting things out. And don't judge it. Even if you think it's a crazy idea, don't judge it. Just give her the freedom to express crazy ideas. And you will find that more women have larger sex drives than you realize. And there are some women who may have been raped or molested and have some shame around sex. But if you can help them work through that, you will find a larger sex drive. And some women physically are not very strong, and that could impede that too. So they get tired fast, too much sex. Definitely better. Yeah, lots of sex. They'll be fulfilled. Yeah, well, think about that, PJ. You say a power trip, right? So if you tell a woman, I no longer want to have sex with you, I love you and I want to be with you, and she divorces you, even if she still loves you, she divorces you because, and these women say, I don't want to be with a man who doesn't want me. Like that's I'm asking women who have never met one another ever, and they're saying the same things. So you ask, if your husband doesn't want to have sex, I want a divorce. I say, what if it's just a boyfriend? They say, I'm out even faster. So if you take away, if that's her only bargaining chip, and you actually say, I no longer want to have sex, she's powerless. So here are some of the physical. I mean, all like really great points, PJ. Hey guys, if you haven't smashed that like button, smash it now. Share this, because I really want to shed light on how important sex really is. And so I'm sharing an article, but I've got an interesting conversation with a man and woman talking about sex, and hearing this woman. Um, I've heard only a handful, hell, handful, maybe two or three women speak as openly about sex as this woman is, and you'll see it in a few minutes. So share the video with men and women. Sex is a conversation that needs to be discussed more openly, without inhibitions. And there are benefits. So I like to add a little bit of science to it also, but we'll we'll weave it. We'll go in and out of science and uh, my perspectives in a combination, amalgamation of everything. So better physical fitness is one of the physical benefits of increased sex. Sex is a form of exercise. According to the American Heart Association, sexual activity is equivalent to moderate physical activities like brisk walking or climbing 2 flights of stairs. The motion of sex can tighten and tone abdominal and pelvic muscles. For women, improved muscle tone improves bladder control. Interesting. Another physical benefit is enhanced. Now, listen to this. This is critical. Enhanced brain function. Preliminary studies on rats. You dirty rat. All you want is sex. But preliminary studies on rats found that more frequent intercourse was correlated with better cognitive function and the growth of new brain cells. Did you hear that? Frequent intercourse was correlated with better cognitive function and the growth of new brain cells. I've talked about how sex can recharge the brain and be better for the brain, but there are actually studies out there to support this. Similar benefits have since been observed in human studies. A 2018 study of over 6,000 adults linked frequent sex with better memory performance in adults age 50 and older. Very interesting. So just because you hit 50 doesn't mean your sex life should die. It's actually in your benefit to keep plugging, pun intended. Keep plugging at it. Improved immune function. Like, how could sex not be important when you see all these benefits? Being more sexually active has positive effects on immune function. Regular sex may even lower your likelihood of getting a cold or the flu. Yeah, that would be an interesting study. Are people who have sex every day, are they less likely to have COVID? uh, Instead of getting the shot, just you get a different kind of shot. You tell women you need your shot. You need a daily shot to keep your immune system strong. Uh, Lower pain levels. The endorphins from sex promote more than just a sense of well-being and calm. Sex endorphins also appear to reduce migraine and back pain. Interesting. You know, really good sex can hurt a woman's back too. So, may promote weight loss. Having sex for 30 minutes burns an average of 200 calories. If you're going to rock it for 30 minutes, good to knock out those sit-ups every night. If you could run, get that cardio up. If you can lift, you can have some power, do all three, lift, run, and abs. You could be a powerhouse for 30 minutes, and you can burn 200 calories. The rewarding brain chemicals released during sex can subdue food cravings and support weight loss. Imagine that. Positive cardiac effects, sexual activity, but not masturbation, has been linked with lower systolic blood pressure. Elevated blood pressure increases the risk of heart disease and stroke. Sexual activity helps uh, dilate blood vessels, increasing the delivery of oxygen and nutrients throughout the body while reducing blood pressure. How can this not be important? Additional physical benefits. Being more sexually active boosts libido and increases vaginal lubrication. Frequent intercourse is associated with lighter menstrual periods and less painful period cramps. I say this to women all the time. The cure for your cramps for your period is more sex. That's it. Here's proof, guys. It's not lying. It is in a woman's benefit to have lots of sex. It will keep her healthy. Additional physical benefits: being more sexually active boosts. Oh, all right, I just read that, right? Okay. More lubrication. So in other words, the more sex you have, the more sex you will want, the more sex your body will want, right? And the woman's vaginas increases lubrication. Frequent intercourse is associated with lighter menstrual, painful. In addition, an improved sense of smell, healthier teeth, better digestion, and glowing skin may be related to the release of DHEA by the body after sex. And people are wondering, is sex important? Like, are you serious? So Freud says all men are trying to return to the womb, right? Comedian said, what after 9 months we bust out of the womb, we run out the vagina so we could have our own life, and then men spend their whole life trying to get back into it. Potential hazards of more sex. So we have to look at both sides of the coin. So clearly there are hazards. So let's hear that. It was once believed that sex increases the risk of prostate cancer. Imagine that. However, a 2016 study discovered that men who had more ejaculations, 21 or more a month, 21 ejaculations or more a month, were less likely to develop the disease than men who had fewer ejaculations, 7 or less per month. Since prostate cancer is the second leading cause of cancer-related deaths in men, this effect is worth noting. Sex is really important for men. For some, sex may increase the chances of a heart attack. Despite this risk, higher sex frequency may help. A 2011 study found that regular sexual activity diminishes heart attacks. Come on, guys. Sex, along with other forms of physical activity, is protective, but infrequent bursts of activity put added strain on the heart, so it needs to be consistent. Discuss your sexual activity with your doctor to evaluate your risks. Unsafe sex could tip the scale of benefits and risk in the opposite direction. Make sure you're familiar with safe sex practices. Okay, so how relationships benefit from sex. Beyond individual benefits, for you and your partner, regular sex supports a healthy relationship in a number of ways. For instance, the oxytocin released during sex enhances a sense of bonding and improves emotional intimacy. This is what I was talking about, PJ. See, a woman works against that. Yes, men secrete oxytocin, just not as much as women do. Sex in a monogamous relationship increases your level of commitment and emotional connection with the other person. Expressing love through sex increases the likelihood of couples staying together. As a result, sex is positively associated with lower divorce rate. So they're saying the more sex you have, the lower your divorce rate. Challenges of having regular sex. Humans are wired to crave the intimacy of sex. Lacking sex can lead individuals in a relationship to grow distant and perhaps look elsewhere. Working with a licensed couple therapist can help address the gap and prevent issues from permeating throughout your marriage. Sometimes maintaining an active sex life is difficult or impossible due to physical or psychological conditions. Couples can maintain a strong, healthy relationship despite these barriers by looking at the non-sexual ways to improve intimacy. Jump-starting your sex life. Frequency of sex and often does change over time, but that doesn't mean sex frequency has to be progressive downhill slide. If you're wondering whether it's possible for sex to be as good as when you first fell in love, the answer is yes. Sex and intimacy can improve as your relationship matures. It just may require a little extra work. Let's see. So it's often stated that the biggest sex organ is between the ears. Upping sex frequency without connecting emotionally or increasing communication isn't likely to produce lasting improvements in your relationship. Managing stress is another key factor for healthy sex life. In her book, The Sex Starved Marriage, Boosting Your Marriage Libido, A Couple's Guide, the therapist Michelle Weiner Davis suggests taking a just do it approach. At first, Many are understandably cautious about my Nike style approach to their sex life. The just do it advice ran counter to everything they had believed about how sexual desires unfold. I could often see the relief on people's face when they learned that their lack of out of the blue sexual urges didn't necessarily signify a problem. It didn't mean there was something wrong with them or that something was missing from their marriages. It just meant they experienced desire differently. Okay. So it's just saying having sex at least once a week provides multiple benefits, growing intimacy. If you're not having sex regularly, ask yourself why. So as you can see, there are many benefits to having sex. So the question is sex the most important thing? Is it? I mean, if those benefits didn't help, do people need to hear more? I like to share a woman. My co-host.
And I'm Desirous.
And today we will be discussing with you. And today we will be discussing with you how my co-host.
And I'm just
Everybody to the Let's Talk About the show. I'm your host, S3x. My co-host.
And I'm
your host, S3x. So I'm going to share a video, and I want you to hear what this woman says about sex. And I'm going to assert most women don't talk as freely and openly about sex. It's going to be even interesting. He asks her about the kind of experience she wants a man to have. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. So I'm your host, S3x, and my co-host.
And I'm Desirous.
And today we will be discussing with you how important is sex in a relationship. How important is sex in a relationship? I think personally, sex is. I think it's very important. I think sex is a huge part of the relationship, not just the fact of it being just sex, but it's a form of communication. It's the physical aspect of togetherness in a relationship.
The first time I'm like, I'm having a proud moment right now.
Oh,
I agree.
you agree?
That's crazy, right? We actually agree on something.
First. So yeah. So definitely.
I agree.
What percentage you feel like sex is?
I think is the most important part of a relationship, though.
This woman just said sex is the most important part of the relationship. You really have to hear the kind of openness in her mindset about sex. I think this is a mindset that's missing. Just hear what she has to say. And he's going to ask her a couple of really good questions.
Only because
I'm listening. I'm not mad at that.
You know what? I feel like if you can have a beautiful physical connection with somebody, intimacy in the bedroom, your relationship
is gonna be happy.
I don't think it's gonna necessarily fail. Like obviously you want to communicate, but I feel like it's easy to communicate and lack that passion, that intimacy, but it's very, very hard to have that intimacy and not be able to communicate.
It's the first time I'm like, So it sounds like this woman is like aware of her own sexuality. And fair use, I'm sharing this only for educational purposes. So under the Fair Use Act, I'd like to share this and for critique purposes. So hear what else she has to say.
Right?
Oh, sure. She got it going on. I like it. I like it. I like that. I like
See, I like this.
I like that.
So yeah.
Okay.
I think it's the most important part of a relationship. Obviously, there's those that, like, oh, well, and probably most of you guys would say this, like, well, it shouldn't be all about the sex.
Yeah,
and it depends on how you hold sex. Like what you think sex is. I don't know if you agree or disagree to that.
Nah, I definitely agree. Because a lot of people be like, oh, they like jump the gun and it's not all about the sex. Sex is not that important. I want to get to know you. Yeah, you can get to know and all that, but when you're in a relationship, when you're dating, when you're,
invested.
Like, yeah, you're like getting to know somebody forever. You're never gonna get to know somebody fully. So sex is gonna be a part of the getting to know them, how they are during, after, when they want it. It's a communication thing. So
I'm gonna say, for me, from where I sit or I'm laying, it is very difficult for a woman to lie to you in the middle of sex. And when I say lie, I don't mean you're asking her something and she answers it and she tells the truth. I'm saying sexuality. A woman's sexuality is so revealing that that's where you really get to know who she is. You get to know things about a woman through sex that she may not verbally express. And so during sex, a woman could tell you things about herself that either she didn't mean to tell you or she didn't know how to tell you. But you can assess, determine, distinguish a woman's really authentic level of interest in you through sexual intercourse. Very difficult for a woman to hide. Yeah, I mean, this is beyond acting. She can act, but I mean, you can really know a woman through sex.
I think it's one of the most beautiful things humans do. And if you can
creation.
Right, like if you can literally enjoy that with somebody and truly escape the world, because that's what sex should be. If it's not like that, you make it like.
I want to have sex with
her. But if you can escape that way, I think that by far the most important thing in a relationship.
So what about if sex is bad?
All right, he's asking what if sex is bad. I lived with a woman for 5 years, and I remember, I think it was the second time I was meeting with her, and I said, look, I think sex is the most important thing. I'm not saying it is the most, but from where I'm sitting, sex is the most important thing. And if it's not the most important thing, then it's number 2. So let's talk about sex. And we talked about it. And I said my whole thing about what I thought of sex. And her response was, this was a woman I lived with. We lived together 5 years. And her response, you could say, kind of opened the door for that 5 years to happen. She said, well, I'm with you. Sex is the most important thing. So we were in full alignment that sex was the most important thing in a relationship. And yeah, that makes a difference. So this woman understands that also.
It wouldn't work out. That's what I'm saying. Like, it wouldn't work out.
What if the sex is bad? So what about if the sex is bad?
It wouldn't work out. That's what I'm saying. Like, for me.
But hold on. But you can't really say it wouldn't work out. Right?
It's a friend. At that point.
It's a what? It's
a friendship. Yeah. For me, it is.
So what about if you're in a relationship, y'all finally have sex and you're not as pleased, but you like the person. So do you work?
Well, see, that's where intimacy comes, because it's not about, this person has everything going on and they know how to do it right. it's not that. It's intimacy.
Right.
And intimacy comes with sort of like, you know, the passion and the emotional aspect and the physical. It all combines. So if you can have that, this is why I say sex is so important, because you shouldn't just hook up with somebody without sort of that type of connection there.
But as a woman, so you wouldn't work with your man to you know, what if you can teach him some things? What if
you can't teach?
Or what if
passion? I'm sorry.
Or what if he's not pleased? Like
you
want him to drop you like that?
Yes.
If he's not pleased?
Yes. If we cannot create something beautiful from that and like truly enjoy it, we're really just, you know, we're just cool.
So now, hold on. So now this is after time of trying, or it's just one time?
No, I don't think like the first 2, maybe 3 times, you know, like it depends on the person. It depends on the comfort of the woman and the man.
Yeah. No, I'm talking about you personally.
For me, it depends on how comfortable he is, how selfless he is, and vice versa. Obviously, for me, I should be able to get that passion within like the second time.
Let me ask you this then. So, what if he's a virgin?
I wouldn't.
You wouldn't. You wouldn't date a virgin.
She wouldn't date a virgin. Wow. Let's hear why.
That's a different topic. I don't think this is for this topic.
No, but I mean that's how important it is sex in a relationship. But if he's a virgin, then
we're in two different places. Like I cannot.
So you need to stop.
Not I want.
So that hoe over there, right? Horse ways, community sex is ideal. Someone you do not bring home to mama. 95.15% of your friends already hit. No matter what their name is, their initials will always be STD. Damn. Ouch.
I want someone experienced. I'm sorry. I'm too old. Like, I think it's beautiful. I think, you know, if you decided to wait and hold yourself off, you know, that's you should share that if you want to.
Played out. Y'all used to be the shit back in the day. Looks like y'all get.
I don't want a hoe either. Like, I don't want someone that's had like half of Massachusetts or half of New York.
Right.
No, but
half Oklahoma.
Or Oklahoma, whatever. No, definitely not Oklahoma.
Oh, okay.
No shade, damn.
No, okay. No, so first, y'all losing our touch out here.
No, it's not that. I think it's respectful. I think it's beautiful. It's just it would not necessarily work for me because you know I want passion and I seek intimacy and I seek sort of like that experience and you know and I'm a thrill seeker. Yeah, so it's kind of hard to get that from someone that's not as experienced. Granted, I'm not saying I'm like this like. You know, I know the moves and I know all the, you know, but I want to be taught. I don't necessarily know if I want to teach.
But that's part of a relationship, though. It's vice versa, though. You can't be so selfish and worried about you being taught. Just sometimes,
but for me, you know, it's a little. Of course, I would. If it came down to that, obviously we're gonna teach each other. But I do not. If I have my choice, I'd rather not be the one.
Right.
Fully teaching anybody.
Okay.
That's all.
All right.
What about you in that same, I guess, question? Would you have sex with a virgin or like?
Would I have
seems different for guys though.
Would I have sex with a virgin? I mean, it all depends on the person. Like her being a virgin, I don't really think that plays a part.
Yeah, seems different for guys.
So also, hold on. You're saying you wouldn't have sex with a virgin, or you wouldn't date a virgin? That's two different things. You asked me would I have probably sex both. With a virgin? Huh?
Probably both. I don't know. Like it's just, I don't know.
So what if you out?
I don't know. I've never been in that position, so I can't really. I don't know what I would do in that. Obviously, I wouldn't know until I get to know this person. So.
Okay. So what
if
you,
I
you know,
really
y'all
like him and I'm
talking,
really digging him,
yeah,
and
then he tells you, yo,
you know, that's different. But that would kind of be a bit of an issue because I don't know. He would have to be incredible. Like he really would have to have a personality that is hard to deal. You know, it's like sort of hard to let go of.
Okay.
Because I don't know. That's a little, I don't know,
All
different for me.
All right. Well, I appreciate y'all.
That was what I wonder, and I showed that because I wonder if more women think that way or want to think that way and just don't believe they have permission. That woman was very open, transparent, honest, and that's a great position for a woman to be in sexually. To be like, you know, that's the role a woman plays during sex, is to open up, right? So to open, to be available. And that's what that woman was speaking like, someone who's open and available, not someone who's got their guard and their shield up and they're protecting and they're not trying to get too close. I mean, that woman is, like she was saying, even if a guy has all the right moves, doesn't mean he's good, because she was saying there's that intimacy, that passion can't be taught. So it's almost like she would be open to being consumed by a man, like sexually consumed. She didn't use the word dominated, and I'm not necessarily saying that, but you can consume a woman and she get lost in that. And I just laid out all the benefits. But what she also said, which is so important, is that if you can't have, and this is what I was saying, why you can know a lot about a woman. If a woman can't give you the intimacy during sex, how is she going to give you the intimacy in the relationship? Very difficult. And so PJ, so it so in listening to that woman, what I'll give her credit for is knowing that she has to be responsible for bringing her own intimacy. That's the impression that I got from her. I did get that she doesn't want to be responsible for teaching a guy, but I'm taking it as that she's looking to have a great sexual experience. Right. She doesn't want to have to teach a guy. She doesn't want that responsibility. I get that. I get that. She wants her needs met. So that's she's probably a woman who has no problem reaching that climax, like just banging it out, and pun intended, man. She wants to, yeah, she just wants to come together and make it happen. She doesn't want to have to hesitate. But see, that's a much more liberating. And if you notice, she wasn't talking in the context of just having sex with a whole bunch of different guys. Like she was speaking in the context of being able to be liberated with that one guy and have the intimacy, the passion, the trust. But if it's not there for sex, this is how important sex is. If you can't have that for sex, how do you think you're going to have it elsewhere? So sex is so important that if you can't not just reveal yourself and allow a person to just completely know who you are, like you strip down who you are and the person can see right through you to who you are during sex, how are you going to be that open and intimate during sex, during non-sex, like out of bed, just on a day-to-day relationship? How can you be fully engaged with the person in your non-sexual activities if you can't be fully engaged with them during your sexual activities? Like you're the same person. Yeah, definitely. She has a very healthy uh, attitude towards sex. I heard a woman speak like that for the first time when I was 19, and I actually almost postponed it because I was like, wow, this woman is so open-minded that I may not be ready. She was 24, I was 19. And that attitude showed up in the bed. Like she just let her guard down and she just gave herself to me. And it was great. It was, in that woman's word, beautiful, right? So, these were, even though this particular woman I'm talking about was highly skilled and gave herself to me, uh, even if she wasn't highly skilled, the sex would have been great. But actually, sex was extraordinary with her because she was highly skilled and gave herself to me. Uh, it allowed me to release the Kraken because I didn't. There was no sense that she was protecting anything. Like I could just, uh, I could just go in after her. All my puns are intended. I could just go in and release myself. Like I could go into the phone booth and come out and lay it down. So and that is a very different experience than being with a woman who feels like she doesn't trust and doesn't and has to protect and shield herself. Sex is very revealing. It really helps you understand who you're with. I mean, yeah, and this is why I'm asking, is sex the most important part of the relationship? I mean, if you don't have trust during sex, then why are you having sex, right? Then what's there in a relationship? I mean, I have a very different perspective about trust in a relationship, but if we just keep it on sort of common sense every day, um, yeah, she's a hypocrite, right? That then it's not really a relationship. It's just a sex ship, right? And you accept that for what it is. Uh, yeah, there are a PJ. There are women who absolutely do not need a man to be responsible for their climax. Like they can just get it. And I've there are women who just know their body so well that they know how to get it. They're basically they're using you. Now I mean it in a good way, right? But when a woman knows her body, really understands her body, and knows how to get to that climax, she's just using you to get there. In the exchange of what people call energy, the energy exchange, right? That becomes part of it too, and that's mutually beneficial. So it's just I found it mind-boggling when I first heard a woman say uh, she was having sex with her husband or any man and doing him a favor. Like that's not sex. I'm not sure what that is. Just put it in, and so when it's mutually beneficial, and that's what that woman sounded like. She was coming from the perspective of sex is mutually beneficial and she's going to bring the intimacy and passion, and that's what she wants from a man, and that was the reason why she didn't want a virgin. But I- and I would say her thinking around that is inaccurate because a man could be a virgin and still bring that intimacy and passion that she's looking for, just as a woman who's a virgin could bring it also. Like yeah, a woman who's a virgin could technically be more intimate in a than a woman who's very experienced. I mean, if I was looking to have intimate sex, the last woman I would choose is a prostitute. That's an interesting thought, PJ. I've met a handful of women who said they would have sex with their husband even when they didn't want to. So I would say they didn't want to, they had it, so he didn't go elsewhere. Uh, because they had it because they knew it was an essential part, an extremely important part of the relationship, and denying their man sex was not a smart move. So they had it. But those women also understood their responsibility for when they wanted sex. Even one woman said there were times her husband didn't want to have it, except he would have it because, for the same reason, you know, he knew his wife had that need. So uh, I think it becomes more of a problem if a woman believes she's just having obligatory, right? She's just, oh, I'm only doing this because I'm in a relationship. I'm obligated. I don't really want to do this. If a woman gets into that, that's when I would start wondering if she's been molested or raped when she was younger. Like she hasn't let herself, she hasn't opened herself up. Like it's almost like she's still hiding, protecting herself. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are exceptions. I read an article once about a woman who uh, experienced excruciating pain during sex, and every time she tried, it was very painful. And it was a condition. I don't remember the name of the condition, but there may be, and that was a rare condition. So there may be women who experience pain, and depending on a man's penis size, it's too big. You know, not every woman likes a large penis. So uh, some women are completely content with 4 inches, and uh, they're happy. So aside from that, if your sexual organs are compatible and she's comfortable with your size, not too big, not too small, like Goldilocks, right? Um, it fits just right for her. So if size is not a problem and it's not presenting pain, and a woman doesn't like sex, I would wonder what's behind that. Caveman type. That's even some of the most intimate, gentle women. Every once in a while, they want you to release the kraken and let the caveman out the cave. They want the caveman to come out the cave and lay it down. They some of the most intimate women still want that. They want to feel a sense of being manhandled. It may not be an everyday kind of thing. Uh, and sometimes as a man, you actually need to express yourself that, like you need to let that out, and it's nothing. There's no toxic masculinity in that. Real monogamy. Ma- Mahog- Mahogany? The real mahogany? Mahogany. The real mahogany. All right, now I got you. Mahogany. Got it, got it, got it. Yes. Caveman pipe. Uh, see if I want to share just a little bit more. So I'll do another screen share. This is psychologist Susan Whitborn, PhD. This is from a magazine, Psychology Today. The secret reason why sex is such an important part of relationships. New research on sex and relationships shows the real reason it can benefit yours. And this is from July of 2017. The article goes, we associate good relationships with sexuality, assuming quite naturally that happy couples have sex more often than their miserable counterparts. But have you ever considered just what it is about sex that makes it so beneficial to a couple's relationship? A new and well-conducted investigation by Anik Debrat and colleagues, 2017, points to the surprising role not of the sex itself, but of the affection that accompanies sexuality between partners. Over a series of 4 separate studies, Debrat and her fellow researchers were able to pinpoint the way that everyday kissing, hugging, and touch between partners contributes uniquely to relationship satisfaction and overall well-being. And this is what that woman was getting at, that intimacy. Let's break this sex happiness equation down for a moment before looking at the details of the study. Debrat et al. Began with the well-established finding that individuals experience higher levels of well-being when they have an active and satisfying sex life. As they noted, the results of previous research demonstrated that the size of the difference in well-being for people having sex once a week compared with those having sex less than a month was greater than the size of the difference in well-being for those making 75,000 US compared with 25,000 a year. That's huge. So the well-being of a couple having sex once a month compared with once a week is analogous to someone making 75,000 compared to 25,000. Like the well-being, your lifestyle in any city in the US, making 25,000 compared with 75,000. That's a big difference. Is it the sex itself or something about sexual activity that is so good for our happiness? You might argue that people who are happier are more likely to have sex more often because they're in a good relationship and are satisfied with it. The good sex then would simply follow the good relationship dynamics. It's also possible that people who are more positive in general are more likely to get involved in a close relationship, which in turn benefits their well-being. Such a cynical process would imply that the happy just get happier. The authors believe that the key ingredient in sex happiness relationship is positive effect or well-being on an emotional high. As they note, however, it's extremely difficult to examine this possibility through the typical questionnaire method, which is subject to memory bias, or in the lab where the situation is artificial. Debrat's work was completed while she was a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Toronto. At the time, she was at Switzerland University, Freiburg. The investigation she completed with her colleagues included a series of studies on adult couples involving increasing levels of control, including, in the last study, not just a one-shot set of correlations, but more sophisticated across time analyses. The international scope of the paper adds to its generality, as does the fact that the sample was composed of usual college student participants, that the sample was composed not only of usual college student participants, but of adult couples studied both online and through in-person recruitment. The fourth and most telling of the studies used the daily diary method and involved a sample of 58 heterosexual couples averaging 25 years of age and in a relationship on average for 4 years. Though relatively young, most of the couples were married. The researchers gave the participants smartphones to use their recording their responses. A previous study in the series analyzing, in that last study, researchers used a cross-tag design to track the daily course of sex and affection. This allowed them to study the effects of sex on day 1 with the effect on day 2, vice versa. Overall, entire course of the study period, the results confirm the study hypothesis that across days of the study, sex predicts affection, and affection in turn predicts sexual activity. The study remained correlational because participants weren't assigned to conditions of sex, no sex, or affection, no affection. Given that such a study would be practically impossible to conduct and likely produce artificial results, the analytic strategy used in research provides strong evidence as a possible of sex affection link. So the authors concluded, hence sex seems not only beneficial because of psychological or hedonic effects, but because it promotes a stronger and more positive connection with the partner. Over time, such experiences build to strengthen the bonds between partners, meaning that their long-term relationship satisfaction is bolstered as well. These effects extend to the experience of one's partner because, as shown when partners' response were analyzed in terms of their effects on each other, when one person draws emotional benefits from sex, their partner's relationship satisfaction is also promoted over time. Right. So, and this is what we were talking about early on, right? So if a woman is promiscuous, she can impede her ability to bond, which she misses out on this. So, yeah, I caught it, PJ, mahogany's timber. I understood. Mahogany, oak tree, got it. So, see, if a woman has disrupted and impeded and aberrated her normal brain function, which is to secrete oxytocin to bond, then even before the sexual activity, there's the leading up, like the touching, the kissing, the tone of your voice. All of those things can secrete oxytocin as well. So if she's not getting the oxytocin high, she's looking for the dopamine high, right? So the dopamine high can come from being with a different person each time, or even cheating, you can get a dopamine high, or just trying some new position, right? So if you tried every single position over and over again, dopamine, like, cocaine, right? So if you get dopamine highs from drugs, over time you'll have to increase the amount because the brain becomes desensitized towards the drug. So you have to use more drugs to get the same dopamine high. So the same thing could have with sex with a woman. If she doesn't get the oxytocin and she's just getting dopamine, then she's going to get the excitement of being with a different person, dopamine, different sexual positions. But at some point, she's going to need more of that. So either more partners or more different sexual tricks. And if she's done them all, she doesn't get the dopamine high, then sex is like, she's not going to get much out of it. And it becomes easy for that kind of woman to withhold. So that could be a big challenge if a man marries a woman who was for the streets when she was young. I was young and dumb, and I was out there in the streets. But what she could have done is impeded her brain. So now that woman is so easy to withhold sex because she's having a problem bonding from secretions of oxytocin. She's getting dopamine, and she's had all the sex with different people. Now she's with you in the same guy. So either she's going to cheat or she's going to withhold it. She's going to do both because she's not getting as much out of sex, because she's not getting what this study is showing is the affection. She's not getting the bonding and the affection, the intimacy of the relationship. That is one of the biggest challenges of choosing a woman who's been out there in the streets. See, this still points to, listen, that's how important sex is. So your ability to bond and give and receive affection is correlated with your sex, your sexual lifestyle. So without that affection, this study is finding that it's the affection that comes before and after sexual activity, even the day after. And the more affection you have, is what the article is saying, the more likely you're going to have sex again. And the more sex you have, the more affection you have. Like, it becomes self-perpetuating. So you're not depending on a dopamine rush. You're depending on the oxytocin, the affection, the intimacy. See, for the ladies who believe for the women who believe that females with a lot of different men is of value to a man, that's a lie. That woman is more capable of withholding sex in your relationship, because she's not getting what you would want a woman to get from sex. Hey, Tony G, that is a perfect way to put it. Dopamine is cheaper than oxytocin. Yeah, I like that. Right, PJ, right. You guys on? Right. Yeah, foreplay, right? Also can secrete oxytocin in the affection, right? Foreplay. All right, sometimes you could even explore and experiment with a woman and only do foreplay and no sex, no sexual intercourse, only foreplay. That is only about affection at that point. But I say it would still be related, it still revolves around sexual activity. So a woman who is only depending on dopamine might have a difficult time with foreplay and no sexual activity. So she couldn't get the full benefit of affection and oxytocin, because, as you say, Tony G, oxytocin is much more expensive. Yeah, you can cheapen it. Yeah, I mean, it's like, imagine you have a Bugatti, a 2021 Bugatti, and you drive that sucker to death. You've got a 2021 Bugatti. It's September now, and you already have 40,000 miles on it. You put too many miles on it. This is the way men look at women. You put too many miles on that body. You could be the hottest thing. You could be that 2021 Bugatti with 40,000 miles on it. And it's September. Year is not even up yet. 40,000 miles. Yeah, you cheapen a 2021 Bugatti with 40,000 miles. You just cheapened it. You cheapened that car. So great analogy, Tony G. I like that. So what all that I'm getting at, this is still coming under the conversation, is sex the most important part? So in this article, when it's to sort of wrap this up, if affection is so important to personal relationship, if affection is so important to personal and relationship satisfaction, can it replace sexual activity when couples lessen the frequency of having sex due to external factors? People may decrease their sexual activity as they get older due to physical changes, and couples that have recently had children may similarly have sex less often. But as long as such couples maintain their affection towards each other, they might offset the potentiality negative effects of lowered sexual activity. Conversely, when couples that feel they're drifting apart and therefore having sex less often, if they work on their physical affection towards each other, the sexual relationship may become reestablished as well. And I didn't even read this article, so that's actually what I was saying, right? Really good. To sum it up, fulfillment in relationship depends on many factors, of which the physical nature of interaction is just one. The DeBrat et al. Study shows that the physical basis for couples' interactions with each other can play a surprisingly strong role. So, hell, my first article, I talked about all these benefits, psychological and physical benefits of sex. I mean, sex is huge. Look at, if you remember all the list, all the things that benefit you physically and psychologically just from sex. I mean, this is critical. And and then I just read Psychology Today, and it talks about the affection, and having more sex increases affection, which affection increases more sex. Yeah, it does. Yes, foreplay increases the climax. Also, kissing, tongue kissing a woman is a way that men transfer testosterone to a woman, which arouses her more. So, kissing, there's a design to kissing in sexuality. So, the more you kiss her, the more you transfer testosterone, the more aroused she becomes. So it's important. I once, when I first learned that, one of the people mentioned and said, "Wow, so maybe that's why prostitutes don't allow kissing, even if they didn't understand the science of it. They understood that they would be aroused, and prostitutes don't really want to be aroused by you. It's just transactional sex. They don't want the intimacy of it." Yeah, promiscuous women are a no-no, and they don't realize that. They believe being promiscuous is liberating, and it's really not. It eventually puts them in prison. In the prison bars, their cell is made up of men from the past and the trauma. Like, they become imprisoned by their own trauma that was self-inflicted by believing that promiscuity is liberating. I mean, these are things that men need to understand. Women need to understand the importance of sex in a relationship. And and what I was saying early on, uh, masculinity. As men back away from their own masculinity, women still want it. So imagine, women want the very thing men have become shy to express, and men want the very thing that women are shy to express, and that's their sexual desire. Sexual desire, once again, has nothing to do with the amount of men a woman has had sex with. It's her desire with that guy she's with. So imagine two people holding back something that's naturally in them. And any woman who doesn't really enjoy sex, I understand a woman can get tired of. I mean, if a guy has a large sex drive, um, she can get tired. You guys probably heard me talk about this German couple. When they met, they were having sex 7 times a day, every day. That's 49 times a week. And they got married because they were compatible in all kinds of ways. So imagine sex 7 times a day. Man, that's a lot of affection, right? So uh, after, I think, 2 years of sex every day, 7 times a day, the wife said she was waiting for it to slow down and her husband didn't. So she put an ad in the paper asking for help. So a woman answered. So so she literally asked for a relief pitcher. she So the wife would have sex 4 times a day with her husband, and the the other woman would have sex 3 times. And at the end of the article, the wife says, "Well, it's cool because we both have sex with my husband, and she and I get along well, and we go shopping and hang out together." So yes, a guy could have a sex drive that's more than a woman could handle. Uh, I don't know if that's an extreme situation where the woman actually voluntarily brings another woman in to help. But I mean, that's how important that wife saw sex, that she wanted to ensure her husband was sexually fulfilled. He wanted sex 7 times a day. After a while, she was getting tired, so she got another woman to step in and supplement. Hey man, I actually asked that question too, PJ. Did this guy have a job? Like, how is he having sex 7 times a day every day? I don't know. I read that article. I think it was in the 80s. I mean, it just stuck in my head. I don't remember all the details. I do know they were a German couple. Probably could find the article somewhere online, but yeah. Um, so I'm not sure how he did that. 7 times a day, every day. I can see the weekends. So, according to research, sex is very important. According to one woman we had in a video, sex is the most important thing in a relationship. I'm with her on that one. Sex is the most important thing. The most important part of a relationship. It is communication. It is the place where you can't hide. What's going on, country boy? Yeah, 7 times a day. That's hey, look, that was the woman being interviewed in the article. So yeah, apparently she had a huge sex drive also. All right, PJ, did the guy have a job? Hell, maybe neither one of them did. I don't know how they pulled that off. So, but according to the article, they were pulling it off. Hey, Tony G, I can't appreciate more your comment. Dopamine is cheaper than oxytocin. I really like that. The cheap high. Cheap high. So sex is really important. Health benefits, psychological benefits, uh, bonding, intimacy, affection, keeping a couple together. And you guys probably heard me say this probably 50 times already. Couples that have sex 4 times a week or more earn higher incomes than couples that have sex less often. That should be incentive by itself. So if one of you is withholding sex, you're robbing the bank account. And there is actually, I think it's informal research. They found that a lot of guys who've been mega successful, most of those guys had huge sex drives, including guys in the military, like generals that were very successful. Alexander the Great. Uh, who else? Hannibal. Yeah, there. I think even Napoleon. Albert Einstein wardrobe. Yes. Rumor that Einstein had 7 suits. They were all exactly the same color and style. There were 7 duplicates. He said he had more important things to think about than what clothes to wear. So he just reached in the closet and grabbed the suit for each day. um, hey, PJ, I would say people confuse emotions with biological secretions. So you could be taught, a woman could be taught to be turned on by flowers. But, uh, but I don't know if a woman can be taught to be turned on at the sight of a man's penis. I'm not suggesting you do that, PJ, but um, like even for a man, there's something about looking at a woman's nude body and there's a turn on, especially if you like the way her body is shaped, right? If you like, for me, I like an athletically built woman. But if a woman is well endowed and just built right, you see her even wearing clothes. I mean, you get turned on by it. But that's going to be nature's way of having us perpetuate the species. But if a man gives a woman flowers, there's a she's been told that that's a good thing. So her brain fires off some biochemicals that say, this feels good because you did this for me. But you could literally, I hate to use the word program, but you can condition people to secrete certain biochemicals, stimulus response. You could say, this is good, this is bad. You could just take 100 children and take 50 and then another 50 and teach them exactly the opposite. And I'm willing to bet. I wonder if someone's done that. No, I'm willing to bet. I'm asserting, Tony G, that what we call emotions is it's learned behavior. So if you call a woman a bitch, she's going to secrete certain, maybe cortisol, certain biochemicals, because she's been told that's a bad thing for a man to say to you. But if you go into the backwoods of a non-English speaking country and you say the word bitch to a woman who's never heard the word bitch before, so she has no idea what it means, she will secrete zero chemicals for that. Zero. Nothing. No Pavlov's dog, nothing. Hey, Tony G, I wrote a book. I don't know if you knew this. It's called "Here's Why You Can't Find Love." It just came out in April, and I spent a section of the book talking about exactly that. The book it's about 5 women interviewing me, and I asked these 5 women, if you are, I said to one of the women, if you and I have been in a relationship for 2 years and it's been going really well, you and I have strong uh, feelings, affinity for one another. And one day I come home and I open up a box and it's a 2-carat flawless emerald diamond ring, and I have a dozen roses. How are you going to feel? And it's interesting to see the woman's interaction with me. And then I asked them, if I would have met you the day you were born in a hospital, and I presented a 2-carat flawless, the same ring and flowers, would there be any emotional response to that? And of course, it's no. So I don't know if it's a chicken and an egg as much as it's learned behavior. Oh, you have it. Oh, thanks. Hey, man, thank you. Thank you for the support, man. Yeah, love to hear your feedback on that. Great. Yeah, yep. Um, some women who've read it, maybe all women who've read it, said that I'm a little bit brutal towards women, uh, and you get to see how I resolve that conflict of telling women, giving some really straight talk, um, and giving women a man's perspective, and actually taking a really solid stand in manhood and masculinity. Um, and these women have to take it and digest it. I guess they could have walked out the room. They could have been upset with me and yelled, and at some parts they were. Uh, but it's a great book for men to read, to see different ways to engage a woman and how to handle it when a woman may not like it. So there's a lot of conflict resolution in the book. I talk about sex a bit in the book, and it's interesting to see the interaction with the women. Um, but and I get, there are several places where I talk about how these biochemical secretions are not necessarily natural. there are some, yes. I mean, nature has it. Country boy, you're talking about primal drives, right? So we're designed to perpetuate the species, right? So you could touch a woman's arm or shoulder or her stomach if it's bare, if you can see the stomach, and that skin to skin contact can have your pituitary gland starts secreting chemicals which has you bond and get both of you aroused. That is how nature ensures that humans will make more humans. And maybe that's what all animals have, right? Um, a female dog may not want to have sex. When she goes into heat, almost she can't stop herself from wanting to have sex. They say when the female lion goes into heat, she demands sex so much from the male that like he's like, chill, chill, chill out. But she demands it. So that's how nature. I mean, that's a great design, and it's a brilliant design. How do you get animals, insects to continuously perpetuate themselves? You give them these catalysts, yeah, give them these secretions that make them want to have sex. Uh, yeah, and so if we have a caveman mind, I would say, country boy, women still have a great appreciation and desire, and perhaps they've been taught to not like that, especially when we live in a culture that says toxic masculinity. Except there are too many women that still want to feel like the essence of manhood, like there's that caveman in you, and this would be a driving force for women choosing bad boys. Um, I've never lived in a caveman days, but I would say that we haven't evolved. Um, we haven't evolved past what biology asks us to do. So when a woman ovulates, she really wants to have sex. I mean, I know women who were in another state, and she called me and said, "I'm ovulating. Please, I need you like now." Like, yes, this is human. So a man can be much more responsive to having sex with a woman, but when a woman's ovulating, like that's the time that she could get pregnant most easily, and that's the time that she desires sex the most. I mean, just nature was brilliant in setting this up. It's just brilliant. Yeah, I mean, it would be the same. Country boy, the difference between cavemen and now is I'm assuming they didn't have women who were protesting masculinity and saying toxic masculinity. They wouldn't do that because the survival of the couple or the group was predicated on a man's masculinity. The masculinity to be able to build shelters, the masculinity to fight off enemies, to fight off dangerous animals. And I lived in Belize with Mayan Indians in the jungle, no electricity or running water, and I saw that what you would call a primitive lifestyle. I mean, and uh, there was no shame around masculinity. I mean, men literally hunted. They hunted for game. We went in the jungle and chopped it down with a machete, came back with a stick, made a hole in the ground and dropped the seeds. So that's all masculinity Could women do those things? Sure, but it's just easier. It's less taxing on a man's body to be able to do those things. Over time, that could be taxing on a woman's body. And just remember, during World War II, right here in the United States, we had so many women working in factories, creating supplies for the men who were off and fighting in the war. They needed more supplies, like quick. So women had to work significantly more hours. And when women worked significantly more hours, their incidence of accidents went up 150% for women. And there were still men working in those factories. And incidence of men having accidents when the overtime increase was zero. It was like nothing. So women don't have the same biochemistry, right? And I'm saying that to say that in primitive times, there's a masculinity that women and the group, the village, depend on for safety, protection, and food and nourishment. So women would want their men to have masculinity. Now, beating up your woman is not necessarily masculine, um, unless you're defending yourself from her initiating it. So country boy, I didn't live 200,000 years ago, but 2 decades ago, I did live in that kind of environment. So I did see that. And I stayed with a family who was the mayor of that village, 329 people, and he had, I think, 9 children. He had a lot of children. The oldest child was 25, and the youngest was about, I don't even know if the youngest could walk yet, or just barely. It might have been 1-year-old child. So he was making babies for 25 years. Yeah, exactly, Tony G. So no matter, so it's like we're fighting nature. Like, when I lived in the jungle, they had the same oxytocin secretions. They had the same biologicals and emotional secretions that were correlated with, um, dopamine and cortisol and endorphins and all that. They had the same biological makeup as we had here. So, and you saw people get happy, sad, jealous, angry. You saw all of that. Their environment was completely different. No electricity, no running water, hunters, gatherers, and still they had the same biology. Um, God, I know I much just said something all from the same woman, Ted. What do you mean? So, and interesting, living with the Mayans, um, sex was important because you wanted to have children. Your children, especially boys, like I worked with he had one son who was 18. His other son, out of those 9 or whatever amount of children he only had 2 boys. One boy was 18, the other one was 7. And he had a son-in-law who was 19 who had moved to the village, moved in with him. And the only reason he moved in because that 19-year-old son-in-law was going to marry his daughter, and his family was against the marriage. So traditionally, the daughter would have gone to live with the husband's family, but since the family was against it, he came there. So that 19-year-old guy, and woof, that guy could swing a machete. Each additional adult male in the family is like having a machine. So even though I wasn't as good at swinging a machete, I was physically stronger than them, but I still couldn't. Like, they had precision on swinging that sucker. They were masters at that. But still, my contribution was still extremely valuable. Oh yes, from the same woman, Tony G. Yes, yes, yes. His wife was actually attractive. Actually, she must have been in her early 40s. Uh, she spoke absolutely no English. Whenever she spoke to me, it was only in Mayan. Uh, the only thing I remember how to say, and it was Mopan Mayan. There's Quechua and Mopan. I stayed with the Mopan tribe or village. Mobelawul means don't worry, and Inenema means no, I'm not. I'm not worried. Not me. Uh, so she only spoke to me in Mayan. I don't remember all the things that she said, but I started learning. I was like a baby. I knew when she was asking me to do something, come eat or something like that. Um, so that village I stayed in, they had no electricity or running water, so they had no TV. And what was interesting, the the next village down had 500 people. I forget how many miles, maybe it was 5 miles apart. The village with 500 people had just gotten electricity 30 days before I arrived, and they had televisions just like that. TV influenced them. So there were behaviors they were starting to exhibit, and it was only coming from television. The village that had no electricity had no TVs, and they were not exhibiting those behaviors. So the media, as much as people say they think for themselves, you really don't. You know, you're being told what to think. I forget the name of a book, but this book talks about how people really don't understand value as a human without some comparison. Like, what's an expensive car, a medium expensive car, and a low cheap car. You only understand it because someone set up metrics for you to do a comparison between very expensive and cheap. How do you assess the value of a car without having those metrics in place? And it's part of the problem. I'd say that's part of the problem why people have in choosing a spouse, being able to know who's valuable to you. Uh, oh, are you talking about my book? God Bless America. The name of my book is "Here's Why You Can't Find Love." You can find, if you go to my Instagram page, you'll see a link that you can click on to buy the book, or you can buy it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, any electronic bookstore. Thanks for joining, man. Kendrick, I hope I answered your question. So I'm saying media. You guys have heard me talk about this book called La Belle Dame Sans Merci, written by John Keats around 1817, and it was a romance, love story. It really had zero impact when it was written, but from 1817 to the 1850s. By the 1850s, it started to shape the culture, and it changed marriage from these arranged or semi-arranged, and the roles and responsibilities in courting and getting to know one another. That one book altered uh, the trajectory of relationships and made it more about romance as opposed to a couple coming together to build a legacy. That one book did it. So if you understand that, and then you fast forward to Hollywood, which is that book on steroids, then you start to see that people are influenced. Now, I'm going to say women are more easily influenced than men, except men also buy into the romance story. You know, if you look at romance, it's always being pushed that the man is responsible for being romantic. And you ask women, what romantic responsibilities do women have? And they look confused because they never heard of that, because no one has fed that to them. Yeah, technically a vehicle is a vehicle, but they don't all perform the same. That's why there's a difference in price. Uh, what technically they get you from point A to point B. Uh, yeah, so there's craftsmanship, but if you're just looking for something to get to point A, point B, you just you could choose the cheapest car, but if you want to look at safety, well, what are and reliability, then you have to look at other factors and assess the value. Is it worth it? Yep. Uh, you guys heard me talk about a book called The Hidden Persuader. It was written around 1956, and it talks about how they use psychologists and sociologists to create campaigns to get people to do things that they normally wouldn't do. So you figure that was the 1950s. Imagine where they are now with that. So I, you literally have to. You've been trained to see things as good and bad and attractive and unattractive. You have to untrain. I know that's not grammatically correct, but you have to untrain to unlearn your brain, to unlearn it. And that takes work. People have triggers to things that may not even make sense, but to untrigger those triggers, it takes work. So there are aspects of relationships that are predicated on triggers. Oh, this happens is a good thing, so I should feel good in a relationship. This happened, I should feel bad, so I should be angry in a relationship. Those are all mostly artificial. No, it wasn't that kind of society. Every man had one wife. So I stayed with the man who was the mayor of the village. I stayed with his family. And they lived in a hut, like with a palm leaf roof, the roof of palm leaves. He had one wife. They, he was, so there was a woman that he had considered to marry first. And that woman was pretty upset when he didn't marry her. Like, she was really upset. There were rumors. eh, I'm just telling you what they told me. There were rumors that the woman he initially wanted to marry was so upset when he married his current wife instead that she went to some voodoo witch doctor to put a spell on to damage him. Uh, so people got upset and jealous just like anywhere else. It didn't matter. She wanted that man. She thought he was a good choice, and she didn't get him, so she was upset. Whether she went to a witch doctor or not is really irrelevant, but she was upset that she didn't get the man she wanted. And his wife won. So they were to my knowledge, they were monogamous. Interesting, the older women, uh, you could, especially if she was washing clothes or in a river or something, you would see older women would be topless. But that was, if probably, I don't know how long before, 50 years ago, probably would have been more common to see topless women. I only saw it a couple of times, a few women, but those were mostly older women who were topless, and there was no inhibitions about about me seeing them topless. But one wife, yeah, 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 one wife, and whoever the wife is going to marry. So he had several daughters. So if his wife is marrying someone in another village, his daughter would have to go to that village. And uh, if there were different customs in that village, the mother would teach her. No, they were monogamous, no concubines, none, zero. Just one wife and several children. I didn't see. I was not aware of any concubines or men having several wives at all. Uh, and I was in two villages. One had 329 people. The other one had 500, like 550 or something. That so good question. I don't really know how the hierarchy. So the family I stayed with, apparently he was chosen to be the official mayor of the village. One of the things that did happen is imagine 320 people in a village in seven different churches, like Protestant, Catholic, Baptist, all came to that one village, and it created a division within the village. It was a division they never had before, and that created some pecking order. I think only three of the churches survived, uh, and that changed the dynamics depending on your relationship with the church. So whoever the priest was who came would offer favors. If you join my church, you'll have these benefits and favors, and that created very different dynamics. Yep, it did. Yep. Because the guy was telling me how before any of the churches came, there was a time of the year where they all celebrated, for planting seed. Like everyone, the whole village came together. And when those seven churches came, they stopped doing that. There was division. So you say you're trying to figure out the default state of marriage and making kids. So marriage didn't always exist. They had to put marriage in place. It was two reasons. One, uh, two people would come together, and if the guy just wanted another woman, he would just leave and leave the woman with children. He'd just walk out. And even when before the church was involved with marriage, people were getting married, and still, if the one party wanted to just leave, they would just leave. There was no obligation. There was no legal obligation. The other thing that happened, someone was explaining during Greco-Roman times that there was a problem that most women were gravitating to the same guys. So you had political power, you were a high-ranking officer in the military, you were a successful businessman, or you were like kind of a brave, successful warrior, right? So you didn't have to be a high-ranking officer, but you were a brave and daring, and you had a reputation as being a successful warrior. Women chose those guys, and so a successful a general in the military, or successful businessman could have 20 women who all had no problem sharing that one man. He had access to resources, uh, and so they all jumped on that one guy. So you had a small percentage of men who had access to many women. And then the guys who were the cooks and the cleaners, the low level working guys, had no access to women. So the fear was that there was going to be a revolt, because you had the majority of men with no woman. And they were afraid that these guys were going to they were going to riot. So that's how they made up this one man to one woman monogamy. Yeah, they were happy, country boy. They were clean air, very clean air out there too. Uh, smells great. You wake up in the jungle. You could live off the land. There's food everywhere. And just seeing the jungle is very different than seeing buildings all over the place. No pollution, no dirt, no trash, none of that stuff. Yeah, yeah. I even heard about a village where even if you're married and the the union of the man and woman is to raise family together, they had no jealousy and ownership around sex. So this is what I was told, was that you could literally have sex with whoever you wanted, and no one cared about it. I hate to, like, there wasn't any jealousy around. Like, there was this sexual, there was a liberation, I guess, in the way we talk about it. Women talk about it now. Um, and then they got electricity. This was somewhere, I think, in Latin America, and and they started seeing on television monogamy and jealousy. And it was interesting, once the adults started being jealous, the children started mimicking with other children the jealousy they saw. The toilet paper in the jungle, yes. Uh, uh, I saw interesting posters showing you how to use corn on the what are they called, the after you eat the corn and what's left, you use that instead of toilet paper. I saw the posters and they were giving instructions on how to use that. What's going on, Justin? Good to see everyone in Instagram, man. Robstagram. Ellie K. How are you, Ellie? We're talking about sex. Yes, yes. After you eat the corn, there's nothing left. You use that like in place of toilet paper. I saw the posters, man. Kid you not. So we're talking about how important sex is, but somehow we started talking about my experience of living in the jungles of Belize with Mayan Indians. Uh, so I look, if you're just coming in, this is, you want to see this whole thing, because I read a couple of articles talking about the importance of sex. I showed some videos. Very interesting woman talking about sex. She actually said she believes sex is the most important part of a relationship, and I easily see that. Because sex, you get to really know a person in the middle of sex. And then I read an article from Psychology Today that talked about how frequency of sex and affection and how that made healthier relationships for people. Like, the more sex you have, the more affection you have, and the more affection you have, the more sex you have, and it self perpetuates. Uh, I don't know. Hey, I know people talk about America being doomed, but we've been saying this for a long time. Um, there's a lot that people are going to have to unlearn, and maybe it's going to take a younger generation to see what doesn't work and just swear to never go down that path again. Right, exactly. So I lived, let me tell you about living with those Mayan, the Mayan family I stayed with. Um, they lived in a hut, and they, just like, you literally tie sticks together, and that's your, 4 walls. It was a good sized place. The floors were made of dirt, and they had one wall to divide. So I stayed in that separate room, and everyone else, the parents had a wooden platform that they slept on. Maybe there was a cushion on it, maybe not. But when I was there, and I slept on a hammock, so everyone either slept on a hammock or on the floor. And I'm pretty sure, and so all of the whole family, sons, daughters, adult daughters, children, minors, all sleeping in this one place. And I'm pretty sure I heard them having sex. I'm sure it wasn't like, the wild taking your clothes off and doing crazy acrobatic things. It was just a intimate moment where, and it sounded like he was having sex. I stayed with him for several months, and I think several times I heard sex, but it was quiet, intimate sex. Um, the wife could have been laying on her side and he just had sex, and the children were right there. So that's different also. Hey, Tony G, exactly. We're all running off the same biochemistry, right? Doesn't matter. And so so I went through 8 different countries in 2.5 years. And I lived in the jungle of Costa Rica as well. And everywhere I went, I still saw the same human paradigm, the same biochemistry. So, yeah, when women ovulate around the world, they generally want to have sex. That's what nature set up. That's not man-made. That's not a patriarchy. Um, that's the way nature set it up, so that it's ensured that we perpetuate the species. So sex is important for perpetuating life, but it's also important for physical health and mental health, and it's important for the health of the relationship. But unfortunately, we've been taught how to use sex as a weapon. So if you think about that, it's important too. You can weaponize sex and destroy a relationship, or encourage you can't make anyone cheat, but withholding it, that's one outcome. And people understand that, yet they still withhold it. Sexual compatibility is important. So if you think about that woman, the video I showed of that woman, she said she wouldn't have there's certain kind of guys she would want to have sex with, and certain guys she wouldn't want to have sex with. So she's looking for sexual compatibility. And sexual compatibility could be like, I just talked about that German couple that had sex 7 times a day, every day. They were compatible for that. I mean, that guy could have never been with a woman who had sex just once a month. That wouldn't have worked. He would have cheated, or he would have hung her. Something not good would have come out of that. So sexual compatibility is important because, and they're talking about that, how sex is also healthy for you, right? So it's a great exercise. It's good. The article talked about how it's good for the brain psychologically. Uh, it's good for helping the body heal faster. It has all kinds of benefits. So if you both have the same kind of sex drive, if you both have the same kind of proclivity towards intimacy, as that woman was saying, intimacy is important to her, you're going to be much more compatible. People like to call me, huh? So sexual compatibility is important. No question, no doubt. So I'm going to do another plug. I haven't done these plugs. It was just relevant. I talk about sex quite a bit in my book, Here's Why You Can't Find Love. If you don't have a copy, if you're on Instagram, you can find a link to purchase the book in my profile, on my Instagram profile. And if you don't go there, you can go to Barnes and Noble or Amazon or any other bookstore. I think Walmart. You can even go in some of these bookstores and find it. So the book is about transformation. It's about relationships, but it's about how people sabotage their relationships, how they sabotage even sex. And then I spend quite a bit of time talking about how people create great relationships, not good ones, great ones. And I even talk about integrity in sexual relationships. So if you haven't read it, it's I've heard great things about it. Some women say I'm a little harsh, and it's enlightening. You just have to get through the brutal honesty that I have in talking to women. So, hey, look, I just talked about a couple that had sex 7 times a day, every day. For some people, that's too much. For some people, once a day, every day is too much, and that's where you have to find that compatibility. Yep, Tony G, good. Yep, yep, right. So people are chasing dopamine highs, which is like chasing a drug high, as opposed to oxytocin, which creates a stronger bond. Right. What if you degrade sex, you could end up impeding your natural brain function, and the only thing that's left is dopamine instead of oxytocin. What during sex, they're both important, both dopamine and oxytocin and endorphins. There are quite a few that are important. Oxytocin is better if you're looking for especially a committed relationship, and there's going to be that care for one another. Yeah, oxytocin is a much better. And when a woman is pregnant, she secretes a lot of oxytocin. So and so take that. So if a woman has sex with too many different men and impedes her ability to secrete oxytocin, she's going to have a problem bonding with even her children. That's problematic, very problematic. That's not my opinion. This is science. So guys, if you haven't already smashed that like button, smash it. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, this is a great opportunity. Hit the subscribe, hit the bell so you get notifications when I put out new videos and when my shows are coming. If you haven't watched this whole thing, go back and watch it. I'm going to leave it on both YouTube and Instagram. Share this video because sex is a conversation we need to talk about much more. So this is my Fridays. I do something that's called YouTube and chill. So we kind of sit back and talk about Friday. We talk about sex and intimacy. Sometimes it's directly about sex, and tonight definitely was that. Sometimes indirectly about sex. So there's the pituitary gland secretes oxytocin. So when it's stimulated, it gets stimulated to secrete that. But if you keep creating trauma to your brain, you're going to impede your brain's ability to secrete certain chemicals. Yeah, I can see that being a problem, being addicted to porn. So guys, I want to say thank you for your support. Always love having an audience that engages me and asks great questions. If you've read my book, please write a review on Amazon. Love to hear your thoughts on it and any feedback. And thank you for supporting and joining me. Until next Friday with another YouTube and Chill, and we'll talk about sex. I want to say thank you. Have a great evening. Enjoy the weekend. I'll be back Sunday with a show called Straight Talk, where we take on social challenges, relationships, money, career. We take on all those things, and we give it straight talk. So have a great evening. Enjoy the weekend. Take care, everyone, and good night.